Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are back with another figure from this brand. It is from Jie Zhi Toys, and interestingly enough, they always include this little tag with the figure, but they never have it attached. It's always just kind of sitting with the figure in the bag. But as you can see, we've got ourselves a very interesting looking Kaprosuchus figure, and honestly, it's a pretty nice looking Kaprosuchus. I was really quite surprised when I did finally receive this at how nice it actually looks. It is quite nicely sculpted, and even the paintwork isn't great, but it's not terrible. I'm actually quite intrigued by the fact that they've included some orange out here on the tail for a species like this. I think that's kind of a pretty interesting color choice, honestly, but it definitely looks quite nice as a whole. So we're going to go ahead, readjust the camera, and get a closer look. So starting up here in the head sculpt, you can see the head sculpt does look pretty good. You've got some fairly decent detail, looking, very much so crocodilian like you would expect it to. You also have some nice paintwork here with some variations of browns, kind of darker browns on the upper side, a little bit of a lighter brown that does transition to a really light tone here for the underside. You can also again see how nice looking the skin texture is down here. We as well have some black that kind of moves through the face and then over the snout right there. The eyes are painted with a yellow and given a black pupil, and of course they're not absolutely picture perfect, but considering this is a random figure made by a super random company I've never heard of prior, they're not bad as far as the placement goes. There's also a little red that moves over the top here where we almost have almost like a little crest on the top of the head of the Kaprosuchus, and you can see that as well, again, is decently painted. It's not real sloppy or anything. The paintwork does have a really kind of glossy look to it, to that red though, but the entire figure has a little bit of a shine to it, but considering it may have recently been in the water, that's okay. It makes sense. We can also see the nostrils sculpted out up here on the snout. You do have an articulated jaw, which is pretty nice. As you can see, it doesn't open super wide, but fairly decent. We have a purplish tone for the inside of the mouth. Interestingly enough, though, we actually have no tongue. So when you go inside the mouth, you can see the detail looks all right, but there isn't actually a tongue sculpted out on the inside of the mouth of the Kaprosuchus, which was a pretty interesting decision. The teeth are all sculpted kind of okay, but they're a little bit sloppy as far as the paintwork. You can definitely see that as you move through. I can now see that this tooth must have been painted with the mouth open, because if you look, it looks like the paint kind of leaked down in that spot, and as soon as you open the mouth, that lines up perfectly to show off that potential possibility, because once you close it, that moves back, and now it doesn't make as much sense as to why we have a little sloppiness of the paint back there. But that lines up perfectly, so I think we just solved that mystery. But again, the teeth do have a little bit of a rounded look, but pretty much what you would expect for a figure like this, and they are, again, okay looking, just sloppy as far as the paintwork goes. But once you close the mouth, they do interlock quite nicely, which does look really good. I think the eye actually looks even a little bit better as far as the paintwork goes over here. But as you move back into the neck, you of course start to pick up that kind of armored look to the back. You also have some black that shows up here, kind of mixing in with the different variations of browns. As you move down, you do have a more vibrant brown, kind of a lighter brown leading down through the leg. Again, more of those black tones as you lead down. You have kind of like a scoot-like appearance as you move down, definitely again continuing with that crocodilian look as far as the skin texture goes. As you lead down into the foot sculpt, you do have the toes sculpted out quite nicely. You can also see the claws are sculpted and painted, and they do have almost a little bit of a genuine sharp look in a few areas, so that's not too bad. They also have a gloss coat on them, but again, like I said, the entire figure kind of has a little bit of a satin shine. As you lead down into the stomach, you can see the stomach kind of just a slight sag to the stomach right there. We can also see some more black spots showing up and a fairly smooth transition as you lead up into the darker browns in the back. Again, you have all of those very bumpy, sort of like that armored look here to the back of our Kaprosuchus as you lead along. Again, you've got more of the black spots mixing in here with the browns. As you lead back, you have, again, that lighter, sort of lighter, it's not a whole lot lighter, but definitely is a little bit more of a vibrant look to it when it comes to the brown that leads down the leg. And you can also see, again, a smooth transition to the lighter tones in the front and back. You can also see some yellowish tones here moving along the back of the thigh. But as you lead down, again, really big scales as we lead through. You can also kind of get a sense of the musculature as you lead down into the foot sculpt. Again, you've got the toes sculpted out, and again, the claws sculpted out, and again, painted with that same tone that we had on the front foot, which is like a dark brown. As you lead along, again, you have more of those kind of like ridges moving along the top of the tail. You can also see we transition to an orange as we lead out into the tail. You have more of the black that kind of stripes down, really big thick stripes as you lead down and you lead out into the tail, which does have a nice curve to it, which you can see. And if we take a look at the opposing side, the biggest difference over here is of course going to be a slightly different positioning for the legs. Also, the head is turned away from us, so you can see a turn in the neck. And as we lead out into the tail now curves toward us. And also the stripes aren't quite as thick on this side. When you look over here, they're really thick. When you look on this side, they're a little bit thinner, and almost they seem more sporadically placed, but I guess they're close to the same positioning. But overall, again, it's not a half bad version. How scientifically accurate it is, I'm not absolutely sure. I'm not super familiar with every aspect of this species, but you know, when it comes to a Kaprosuchus figure, it's not half bad looking. But one thing I was interested in though is, was it a bootleg of the Schleich Kaprosuchus? Because it kind of looks like it, honestly, at first glance. So I did pull my Schleich Kaprosuchus out here, and we are going to compare the two here in just a moment. But of course I want to get a size for you guys first. For a size, lengthwise, you're looking at about 8 3/4 inches, or a little bit over 22 centimeters, closing in on 22.5, but not quite there. For a height, around 2.5 inches or 6.5 centimeters to the top of the tail. And then for the head, just a little bit over 2 inches. Actually, I would say just shy of 2 1/4, or around 5.5 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect A human being next to our Kaprosuchus from Jie Zhi Toys. And you can see again, it's got a pretty decent size to it, but it's a fairly familiar size range. Like, it's right there in the same size range as a few of the other Kaprosuchus out, like the Schleich version or the Papo version. So if you do have those versions, you're really going to have a good idea of the size of this one. But for another comparison, again, the comparison I was speaking of earlier, here is the Schleich Kaprosuchus next to the Jie Zhi Toys version. And it's not until you actually see the two together where you realize that they aren't quite as similar as you might think. And the Schleich version, I would say, actually looks better, except for the teeth. The teeth in the Schleich version are horrendous, but if you could just move past those teeth, I think this figure here definitely, the Schleich version looks better than the Jie Zhi Toys version. But if we bring them here and look at them from the front, you can definitely see, again, some similarities as far as like the overall visual. Just different, curvatures to the tail. The heads are both turned to the left and kind of leaning up a little bit. The legs are kind of in a similar position, but not really at the same time, I guess. They're both kind of just portraying a walking version. So very different looking figures when you actually see the two together, which is surprising because, again, at first glance, I instantly thought, well, that's a Schleich bootleg, but obviously it is not. It is an entirely original sculpt. So that's definitely good news for this figure, but clearly you can see, again, they are pretty much the same size. Also, here is a comparison with the Papo Kaprosuchus, which does also have a fairly similar look to it as far as the sculpt goes. I think the biggest similarity between these two is the positioning of the legs are kind of similar, but again, a little bit different at the same time. So maybe there's like joint influence between the Schleich and Papo Kaprosuchus into creating this one. But you can see, again, a little bit of a similarity as far as the leg positioning, but everything else on the figure is quite different overall. But obviously you can see the Papo version is just a little bit bigger. Then for just a few random comparisons, we also have the Collect A Deluxe Dimetrodon, which you can see is actually of a fairly similar size. The Schleich Diabloceratops, which you can also see again, is kind of similar as far as like the height of the figure and everything, but obviously you're going to find a lot more length on the Kaprosuchus. We've also got the Safari LTDU Tyrannus, which is currently giving a little kiss to the snout of the Kaprosuchus. We've as well got a Mattel Velociraptor, which you can see again, not too far off as far as a size. And the final comparison is with the other Jie Zhi toy figure that I have recently reviewed, which is the Brontornis, which you can see again is significantly taller than our Kaprosuchus. So this Jie Zhi Toys Kaprosuchus figure is pretty cool, honestly. A nice little surprise, if you ask me. I had not heard of this company prior, however, I do definitely have my suspicions that they may be Earth Story, just kind of releasing figures under a different name, and you'll see why in a very near future video. But the figure overall is pretty nicely sculpted. I feel like they definitely did a fairly good job on the fine detail. I think the only thing, honestly, that this figure is missing to really improve the realism would have been a dark wash. Had they applied a dark wash, I feel like the paint job would have really come to life in a more realistic way. That said, the paint apps themselves are okay. They're not anything to marvel over, but they're decent for what they are. A little sloppiness here and there, especially when it comes to like the paintwork of the teeth, as well as the striping out there on the tail being inconsistent from one side to the other. But the color scheme is natural enough, and I feel like, again, as I already mentioned, that dark wash would have definitely tied it all together perfectly. But the sculpt, again, fine detail-wise, looks decent. The pose looks decent. I feel like they definitely took a little inspiration from the Schleich Kaprosuchus as far as the pose goes, but definitely, you know, a bit of difference as well. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, again, a nice natural sort of walking pose for the figure, so that's all right as well. And then you also have an articulated jaw. However, the articulated jaw is a little goofy just because there's no tongue inside the mouth, but it still is fun to have the ability to, again, articulate that jaw and just add a little posability and display options with the figure. So if you are interested in this, I will include a link in the description to where you can purchase it on Amazon.com. So check that link, go grab this if you want it, and like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.